Hey everybody, welcome back to the Soda Nerds, the show where we talk about comic books, collectibles, and pop culture. Great to have you here, whether you are listening on podcast or watching through YouTube. We just appreciate you being here. We always appreciate any support that we can get, so great to have you here. Today, if you can remember back a few weeks ago, we had an episode with a guest talking about the new Matt Reeves Batman movie.
So all in all, I thought the movie sucked,
which had some interesting takes on it, to say the least. And in that episode, we went really more of a movie-heavy perspective on just Batman as a whole, as a character. But with that, we had some comments come out of that video from some people that really disagreed with some things that were said, but I had the pleasure of sitting down with one of those people that commented, and we had more of a comic book chat about Batman, and I think you guys are going to enjoy that. That's what you're going to listen and watch today. But I sat down with fellow podcaster Tony Berardo. He is out of the Tampa area, and he is a huge Batman fan. Anyway, he wanted to hop on the show and just be able to share his perspective of the new Batman movie, because he is a super huge Batman nerd, and we kind of just geeked out for a while and talked about Batman. I'm glad you guys are going to be able to watch that. I think you're going to enjoy that, and we will throw down all of Tony's handles in the description of this video. I mean, he runs his own podcast, pretty successful, his own YouTube channel. He's got a website and everything like that. So make sure to check that out at the end of this episode. But without further ado, let's get into it. This is our Batman chat with Tony Berardo.
Soda Nerd.
What's up, Johnny? How are you, man?
Good,
Thanks for having me on, dude. This is awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. So Tony, him and I got connected here. For those of you watching and listening, we posted a TikTok a couple weeks ago about the new Matt Reeves Batman movie, and we had a guest on that had some interesting takes, to say the least, about the movie. And Tony was one of the many that commented on that, heavily in disagreement with what this person had to say. And said, hey, I'd love to get on and talk Batman with you guys. Although we don't have said guest back to talk with us, I thought it'd still be great to get your perspective, and you being a fellow podcaster, that'd be fun to just chat up a little more Matt Reeves Batman.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, and I normally don't. I'm not that type of guy that comments on TikToks typically.
Yeah,
because TikToks, I'm like, it's different than Instagram in my book. TikToks is more, you just want to have fun with buddies. That's kind of how I look at it. And you want to be goofy, and you're not doing it for the gram, right? You're just kind of doing it like to fuck around. So I don't really comment, but when I saw yours, and I am a fellow podcaster, shameless plug, the Berardo Podcast, check it out.
For sure. And we'll before you go any further, obviously I'll have stated it in my pre-recorded intro, but we'll get everything thrown in there for Tony. He's got some great stuff. You guys definitely got to go check him out. So
thanks, dude.
Anyway, carry on.
So when I see, there's two things that I love, and Johnny's seen the video of it, but there's two things that I really am obsessed with, and not family stuff. So like if my wife is listening, that doesn't count. This is like me personally stuff. So of course I love her, but the two top things that I love in life is my podcast and Batman. Like those are the two things that I nerd out about. So like creating content for the podcast and what I'm using. And then of course the Batman, not just the movies, but comics as a general. He was my favorite superhero growing up. I loved Superman, of course, but Superman to me was always like something I couldn't be.
Yeah.
Or it's impossible. But like Batman, I was like, dude, I could work hard and I could save up money and I could be Batman. Like that's easy. So he's always been my favorite. So when I saw that Jabroni comment on your, he was in that video, and I was like, this dude, okay. So, cause I thought he was going to like lay out like a couple issues with the film, which of course there's always going to be problems with the film, and you're always going to have disagreement. But that dude was like, unless you guys cut it up to where it was an hour-long podcast and he was being nice to the Batman for 50 minutes of it, and then you only took a few minutes. Yeah, that's what I thought. You didn't do that. So he was butchering the film. And I'm like, is this clown like the same guy that likes Josh Whedon's like Justice League? Like, who is this guy? Like, So I'm like, I had to say something. So I'm like, I'm glad you're giving me a chance to talk. And I'd love to have him on my podcast too. No hate. He can have the opinions, but dude, come on.
I even tried to get him on this conversation with us. And he at first he's hesitant because he's like, I went through those TikTok comments, and if this is just going to be an hour long of me getting my ass handed to me, I was like, nah, this guy's cool. I think he just wants to shoot the shit and talk about Batman, which I assume you would, but it's it was an hour long podcast where we took, 3 minutes out where he was apparently barfing whatever he did, throwing it up, right? But crazy. There was no love for anything Matt Reeves, and even I've listened to some of your other stuff talking about Batman, Tony. Absolutely no love for Zack Snyder either. He thinks that the Snyderverse is the worst portrayal of Batman, which I know you just love to hear that.
Yes, dude. We're gonna need to get this guy back on. I will not bust his chops, I promise. I just want to get what drug he's on, because obviously his perception of reality is very skewed, and something's going on in his head. I don't know what's going on.
So I'd love to ask you, because I know we had him, and he really took it from, he's not a comic book guy. He hasn't read Batman comics. He really grew up just Batman movies. So it was he took the movies and really went with that. So everything he judges, new Batman's coming out, it's all based off of what he's watched in movies, not what he's read. But I know that, or I'm assuming you are a comic book reader when it comes to Batman. So I just wanted to kind of hear your take, and for anybody that's listening, they've heard the movie take from the Soda Nerds, but the comic book take from the Soda Nerds and how it kind of squares up with Matt Reeves' portrayal of the Batman.
Yeah. So a couple things there. So first, yes, I am a comic book fan. I don't read comic books as much anymore, obviously, because unfortunately I have a mortgage and a wife. So my priorities, trust me, if it was up to me, I'd be doing it for a living. But yeah, I mean, I'm 36 years old, to put it in perspective. What I used to do was grab my fucking JanSport book bag. I would throw in my shitty CD player, and I would bump like 9-inch nails as it was skipping in my book bag. And I would skateboard to the local comic book shop, and I would just hang out there with me and my boys. So yeah, as a kid, of course, I watched the comics. And I think what people have to understand when they watch superhero movies is there's two types of people. There's a person that wants a superhero movie, legit superhero movie, that is just entertaining and fun, and your girlfriend or your boyfriend that's not into comics could watch it and actually enjoy it. A great example of that, probably the best example of that, is The Dark Knight, in my opinion. Yes. Because that's just a great, you don't need to know Batman or Joker. It's just a great film. It's in kind of like the time that we're in, so you kind of believe it, like it makes sense, versus like watching Batman Returns, which I personally think is a fantastic film and my favorite Christmas film. And then like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, where you're like, it's a little campy. There's some things going on in there, like Danny DeVito popping out of the sewer as a penguin. I don't know if I believe it, but I watch it.
Yeah.
So there's two types of people, and I think we get confused sometimes where, because it's happened for 30 years, there hasn't really been a movie that's a true portrayal of the comic book. If you really think about every movie, even Marvel, especially Marvel, but if you look at every single superhero movie, we haven't seen it. So when people watch a movie like Matt Reeves' The Batman, I guess if you're not into comics, you could probably have that opinion where Dark Knight's better. Dark Knight, I would say, is a better film.
Yeah.
But the only reason it's a better film is because of why? Why is that? The Joker.
Well, yeah, I was going to say Heath Ledger. Absolutely.
If you take Heath Ledger out of that film, you don't like the movie. Sorry, that's just a fact. He made the movie. It was fantastic. Whether he lived, or not, it still would have been the greatest movie that you've seen. Yeah. Best comic book movie, I give it to Matt Reeves' The Batman. And I will die on my grave for that, because people don't know this, but the very first introduction of the Batman, 100-something years ago, was 140?
A while. It's been a while.
It's been more than one person ago. Your grandmother was born, and then so was the Batman. That's how old the Batman is. the very first portrayal of him was in Detective Comics. So before it was DC, it was Detective Comics, and they used Batman as the flagship to start the franchise of these comic books. And they didn't know what he was going to be, but the very first edition, he was just a detective. He wasn't this dude that was rolling around doing backflips with Robin off of, you know, tops and fighting, you know, the Joker and Two-Face. Like, this wasn't a thing. He would go in and he would solve crimes.
Yep.
And that you see in the Batman. And when you understand that he's not jumping off buildings for 3 hours, that he is in that bat suit for fucking 2 hours and 54 minutes.
Yeah.
There's 6 minutes where he's Bruce Wayne. And by the way, crushed it. Because what I appreciate the most about this film, probably more than the fact that he's in the bat suit the entire time, which has never been done before, and I thought it was so ballsy, was because Bruce Wayne, like comic book Bruce Wayne and Batman, Batman is him. Bruce Wayne is the mask. He's not really Bruce Wayne. He's really the Batman. And when he walks around as the playboy, philanthropist, and all that, he's actually having a mask on. And that's been portrayed in other films like Christopher Nolan's Take, where ironically enough, you know, with Anne Hathaway, they're dancing around, they're at that fundraiser, and Bruce Wayne's the only one not wearing a mask. And Christian Bale even says something where, you know, this is my mask, this is what I'm wearing. He says that in the film. So it's kind of referenced a little bit because that's how Batman has always been in the comics is, you know, he's more the Batman than he is Bruce Wayne. And I think people kind of don't give Robert Pattinson enough credit where he's a better actor in The Cowl because it's only about the eyes. And he doesn't have to say a lot because the Batman doesn't say a lot. You know, he's that fear and that intimidation without saying anything. And that's how he strikes fear into criminals. And Matt Reeves is the only one that has been able, you know, to depict that in 3 hours. Where 3 hours, that whole 3 hours from the opening scene, spoiler alert, from the opening scene where he talks about, I am the shadows.
Yes.
Bro, that alone, like I'm just talking about it now. I don't know if you can tell. Zoom in. Yeah, I got goosebumps.
Yeah, there you go.
Dude, just that alone is like, that again has never been portrayed in live action. So when you see something like that, and that's the whole tone of the film, that's in my opinion why it's the best Batman movie to be portrayed in live action.
Well, and I think obviously you're correct. Whereas I've heard other people say, and even the last guest that we had, you know, not to talk about him too much or beat the dead horse, but he also had a problem with the portrayal between Bruce Wayne and Batman. But my mind, ultimately with this movie, I think what I enjoyed the most out of it is it seemed like Matt Reeves is trying to build Batman, right? Where DC has kind of been, the 30,000 foot view has been DC, if you're comparing to Marvel, has always been, they rush things. You know what I mean? There's not a slow game, whereas Marvel has taken the slow build. You know what I mean?
That's right.
That's what I really loved about this Batman movie is it seemed like, well, he's growing something. He's not going to be the perfect movie Batman that Christian Bale was right out of the gate. You know what I mean?
100%.
So that's what made me excited, where it was like, well, maybe DC is going to try and develop a character. You know what I mean? Maybe we're building towards something better here. Whereas I was not used to seeing that in the past. And that was kind of what I took away as, well, it'd be interesting to see what happens next. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah. And, you know, we don't think about that. And I think that's obviously DC's fault for making numerous mistakes over the years. But one of the biggest mistakes they did is they're trying to be like Marvel. And, you know, you look at like Joaquin Phoenix and the Joker. That's a great example of, you can't, you know, because everyone tries to compare Heath Ledger with Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix was only the Joker the last 15 minutes of the movie. Like true Joker. And, you know, truth be told, there's been so many variations of comics with the Joker in particular that might not even be the real Joker that you and I know. You know, that might have been Arthur Fleck from the Joker. That might have been like something that motivated the real Joker to come out of hiding and be a psychopath. And, you know, Arthur Fleck was just like the start of the Joker, right? So I use that as an example because you can't really compare Joaquin to Heath Ledger because Heath Ledger was the Joker already when we met him. You know, he was in the opening scene. Yep. And I think people are trying to do that with Robert Pattinson, where we're seeing like the Joaquin Phoenix, so to speak, where we're seeing him build. And it's year 2. And again, going back, if you follow the comics, even year 1, year 2 in Long Halloween, you look at all that stuff, and even Frank Miller's take on a lot of stuff, where if you look at all these graphic novels where it starts Bruce Wayne and the Batman, that's what I thought was so great about this film was even like the jump, which a lot of people don't know, but when he was on top of the police station and he goes to the very, very, very top, he like hesitated. He goes, huh. Because it looks like, from our perspective anyway, as the viewer, that might have been the very first time he was on a building that high. And everyone was making fun of the squirrel suit, but dude, he's only 24 months being the Batman. You know, if you look at like The Dark Knight or Batman Begins and you look at those movies, Bruce Wayne comes back from Ra's al Ghul's thing, he saves him, and then he comes right back, and already he's got like tanks and fucking, you know, there's no buildup. I mean, day 1, he knows how to fly out of a train. Get the fuck out of here. Like, that's what I love the most about Matt Reeves' take on the Batman is it's the build up to your point where we can have 3, I would even say up to 6 movies because of all these spinoffs and everything. Where we can have so much time. And the very last Batman movie that we see from Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson, I feel like would be Ben Affleck's version. He's 20 years in, you know, and again, a lot of people do that as well with Batfleck is comparing him to Robert Pattinson. Dude, that guy was the Batman for 20 years. Of course he's more badass. Of course the warehouse scene is the greatest scene on the history of the planet. We get it. But this is year 2 Batman. You know, it's just, there's so much room to grow and, it's fucking awesome.
So as a big, so you're a big DC guy, fair to say?
Oh yeah. Bigger than Marvel for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we talk a lot of Marvel. Some might say we're just Marvel fanboys, which they may not be wrong. You know what I mean? We ultimately love comics, we love collectibles, but Marvel seems to take the cake as far as topics we talk about. But I'm curious, from a heavier DC fan, do you think DC with Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson, the Batman, do you think they're in a position where they could start to do this with more characters, or have they just tried so much and fallen short, you know what I mean, with trying to develop, whereas it's just it's too late? Or do you think it's like we could actually see a DC universe kind of build up, not exactly like Marvel, I hate to compare, you know what I mean, but kind of along those lines?
No, good question. Well, first let me say, you know, I've always been a comic book fan. I mean, I have a stack of, you remember, how old are you, Johnny?
I am 30.
30. So yeah, 30. So you remember Wizard magazine, the subscription service, way back in the day. So I used to have that, and I used to subscribe all the time to different, you know, comics, and I used to get that shit all the time. A lot of Marvel. Yeah. And I think what's cool about the Marvel franchise as a whole is it's become more mainstream to be a geek, a nerd.
Yeah.
So I actually appreciate Marvel and what they've done, because I don't think DC or any company is ever going to compare to it. So it's not that I like DC more. It's just I'm grown from DC, and that's kind of what's in my blood, you know. But a lot of people probably listening are like, yeah, but I dressed as Spider-Man as Halloween as a kid. Me, it was always Batman, Joker, like Superman, right? So I'm just kind of grown for it. But to that point, I think DC's in an interesting position where you look at like Marvel, what they've done with series, and they've crossed series into live action movies, right? You know, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you know, Agent Carter, like all that stuff. It's all the same timeline, which is super interesting. But DC, I think what they need to do, if I'm the executive at DC and Warner Brothers, I would say to do multiple timelines, infinity timelines. There's no amount that's too much. Because look at like Titans, which is a great series. That's never going to tie into the DCEU. Just like the Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, most likely, I hope they don't tie that into the DCEU. It's its own thing, you know. And I don't think I don't think we need that. Like, I don't need it to tie into one time frame, because again, if you're a comic book lover, this is where people get it twisted. if you're a comic book lover, Batman and Superman and Robin and Joe, they've died multiple times over.
Yeah.
There has been reboots after reboots and multiple timelines, but the comic books don't call it timelines. They just write a new edition.
Yeah, exactly.
So Marvel is even smart enough to not do that, but it's kind of interesting if I'm DC, because I'm like, Marvel doesn't do it. Why don't we make that? Why don't we make Robert Pattinson one timeline and have a new Superman, not Henry Cavill? Let's restore the Snyderverse, which I want to get into with you. We'll restore the Snyderverse, and let's have that with Wonder Woman and everything we know and love. But then in 10 years, I want to see Robert Pattinson team up with a different Wonder Woman, right? And a new Justice League. I don't need, that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to push everyone's attention to like one timeline with like one Black Adam, like one Shazam. Like, no, bro, like it took Marvel 10 years to get the Avengers.
Yes.
They need to take their time. DC, just take your time. But imagine if you could have, like, what if there was 5 Iron Man movies, like 5 different Iron Man movies? You wouldn't watch that? Of course you would watch that.
Yep.
Robert Downey Jr. is the best, no question.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of want to see Tom Cruise as Iron Man too. You know, like there's rumors of that. Like, I'm hip to it. I'm not hating on it. Like, the more comic book shit that's out there and the more timelines, I'm totally game, because it doesn't need to be together on one timeline. So that's what I would do if I'm DC, is have multiple timelines and have multiple ways of getting people's attention to it, you know? Because I think every director could make a super interesting Justice League. You know, like, I'd love to see Matt Reeves go all the way 10 years from now and make a Justice League. And I'd love to see, you know, maybe another director, not Zack Snyder, but maybe another director. So maybe we have 3 timelines that eventually lead to it. So that way my kids and my kids' kids are still talking about fucking Batman movies and Superman movies and Spider-Man movies. You know, it doesn't all have to tie in. So,
I hear what you're saying. And I think even because that's like the question is, well, how do you tie? How do you do this? And it's all stems because the MCU spent 10 years creating this one timeline, right? So now if you're a comic book fan or a movie, I'd say more so a movie fan of superheroes, now that's what you have to compete with, right? Everybody just views that this is what it's got to be. Whereas what you're saying, I totally agree with, where I'm a Spider-Man guy. So I'm like, well, I watched 3 different Spider-Men and I loved all of them. You know what I mean?
And by the way, not to interrupt you, Johnny, and by the way, when you watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you still like that as much as you liked Andrew Garfield or Toby or Tom. It's a different take. They're not going to tie in fucking cartoon Miles Morales with Tobey Maguire. They're never going to do that. But to have that separate timeline, dude, that's what it's about, man. You know? Yeah. And I think it's less confusing for people too if you do it that way. If you have multiple timelines and, you know, everyone's like bitching about the Ben Affleck not coming back as bad. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, if they're not going to do the Snyderverse again, no problems. But what if we had 5 more Batmans? There might be other people out there that are better suited for the role than where we're at now. You know, everyone didn't think Jack Nicholson could ever be topped as the Joker. Heath Ledger comes. You know, everyone said Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man. And then Andrew Garfield came and you're like, he's pretty good.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. And then no one's going to be better. How did they cancel that? Oh my God, Sony, you piece of shit. And then Tom Holland came and you're like, whoa. We waited 10 years for it and it's worth it.
Yeah.
And that's worth it.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. And I even said, I had this conversation the other day with one of the other guys. I said, you could make 17 different Spider-Man movies with 17 different Spider-Men. And I'm going to go watch every single one of them. You know what I mean?
Fuck yeah.
So that's where it's like the MCU, they created this 10-year long endeavor, but now they've kind of shackled themselves because of it, because everything needs to make sense to everybody at all times. You know what I mean? You can't just start something new. It's got to correlate with what you've already done, you know?
Right. That's right.
And that's where I tell the guys, I'm like, well, that's why we're now getting the multiverse in the MCU, because they need an excuse to just start doing random shit. And it's good, and it's going to be the multiverse.
Yeah. And again, which by the way, they should have been doing random shit from the get-go, because it's going to hurt them, because now you got like, you know, Ironheart that's going to come out. and I heard Robert Downey Jr. might voice Iron Man in it. But you know, when that comes out, don't expect it to be the multi-billion-dollar movie franchise that Iron Man created. Like no one's going to watch it. But maybe if you had Ironheart come in a little bit earlier when Robert Downey was still in the movies, you could have had room to build. But now you're going to start creating new things without character building. And I think that's what DC's been doing, is they just start creating shit without character building. And it's hurt them. So that's why I say I don't need shit connected. Just give me a bunch of different shit and I'll go watch it. As long as it's good content. And I think the Batman was a great example of what can be done from the start. And again, you know, it's so hard to compare these movies because I'm a big... Dark Knight was my favorite live-action Batman take. And then I saw, you know, Ben Affleck as Batman, and I'm like, bro, that warehouse scene in Batman vs. Superman. Dude. Yeah. That's how Batman is. That's Frank Miller style. Yeah. But it's a different world than what, you know, Christian Bale's Batman was. So it's like, that's not what it is. Except when you see that type of shit, and when you watch the Batman, the Matt Reeves take, this is why I love that movie so much, is the fighting wasn't just like, because that's all Christian Bale did. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like there was no action. There was no fight scenes. The Batman, my dude is like straight up doing jujitsu, throws. Yeah. He's, you know, using his grappling gun and he's taking people down like in the Arkham games. Like, bro, like you just gotta, they're all different. They're all good. But it's hard to compare from one to the other.
Yes.
With all things, Marvel and DC, it's just tough. Like, you know, I think everybody, if another Iron Man comes out, like Tom Cruise is supposed to apparently come back, because have you heard that rumor?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's supposed to, but if he comes back, I think people are going to like hate on him for not being Robert Downey Jr. And that's where you make the mistake, being a quote unquote nerd or a geek. You got to appreciate the idea of there's different versions everywhere, and you just can't compare. It's too difficult to do that.
Yeah. You know? I don't know. I think it's hard, again, as a Marvel fanboy, right? It's hard to have allowed my mindset to kind of get warped and tainted by everything needing to be perfect, because it's been perfect. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm trying to get out of that mindset. Whereas, like I just told you, if you sit down and think about it, well, I'm going to watch a Spider-Man movie regardless of who it is, regardless of who directs it, regardless of the timeline or whatever. It's just the love of the superhero. It's the love of the original comic. It's trying to train my brain to get back to that, where it's like, it doesn't need to be perfect. No. You know what I mean?
No, so, and I think, they are, man, Marvel, it's hard to find a bad Marvel movie. Yeah. Like even just off the top of my head, I can't even think of one that I wouldn't watch again. Maybe Captain Marvel. I don't know if I would watch. I don't know if I watch that garbage.
You'd be in good company with this group by saying that. So
yeah, but it's I mean, even the series, like, you know, Iron Fist, you can't count that one. But I mean, yeah, all the series are great. Like they've just done such a great job, you know, building that up. And you know, you got to give it to the OG. You know who started the Marvel movie franchises, quote unquote.
Well, technically, it's Tobey Maguire.
Technically, but before that, who got Marvel out of bankruptcy? Do you know?
It's not Howard the Duck.
No, it's not.
It can't be that.
It should have been, though. It was Blade, man.
Oh, Blade. Yes, yeah, Blade.
Yeah, and you know, people don't understand. Like, again, this is what I see what comic book movie should be. Where Blade's a comic book movie, and so facto, the first comic book movie that got Marvel where they needed to be. Now, am I upset that they're not going to bring back Wesley Snipes as Blade? No, because that was 20 fucking years ago. But the idea is, what if Wesley Snipes does come back? Let's call it Blade 4. It doesn't need to connect to MCU. Who cares? Bring him back. My dude has been in a couple movies. He can handle it. But like, that's my attitude with comic books, is like, if I read a comic book that is like, you know, year one Batman, and I see another comic that is, you know, Frank Miller's graphic novel, I'm not gonna like say year one is the comic book, that is the Batman comic book. This Frank Miller one doesn't exist. No, bro. There's multiples.
Yeah.
Like it's cool to keep it riding. And WB for some reason can't get that through their fucking heads, which is why, like, me as a fan, I'm a big proponent on Twitter about restoring the Snyderverse. So your boy out there, if he wants to come on my show and talk about that, I'd love to get his take on that. But I mean, what do you think about restoring the Snyderverse?
So this is where I was going to go next, right?
Okay.
I tend to always send people onto a Marvel hiatus, so sorry about that. But
No, I got you out of it. You see how I did that?
Yeah, there we go. I know. You're like, all right, let's fucking talk about Batman again. Let's go. So here we go. Back to Batman. One of my questions was for you, because I know you are a Snyder fan. Let's say we're restoring the Snyderverse, and Zack Snyder on his mind is, I am catering my future plans to Tony Berardo himself. What do you want to see happen?
So I need a Man of Steel 2. That's the first project. Got to have that. And then I think that needs to be after Zack Snyder's Justice League. So what did Superman do afterwards?
Yeah.
Right? Like that would be a rad film to where he's still kind of, remember, he was dead for so long. So he's still getting used to it. You know, he forgets how to like grocery shop. Like I want like that type of like character building, not literally that, but like that type of character building with Lois Lane, and maybe the Martian Manhunter comes in and him and Superman kind of, you know, maybe they formulate a plan and talk about it a little bit at the end of that movie. So, but it's only Superman. I don't want any cameos. I don't want shit. Henry Cavill deserves a Superman 2.
Yeah.
So that'd be the next movie I do. Then the movie after that is Justice League 2, which of course you leave some teasers and some post-credit scenes at the end of Man of Steel 2, but you know, you bring it back Batman, you do your thing. Now, parallel to that, as this is happening, I want a series with Ben Affleck and Deathstroke on HBO Max. I'm not selfish. I just want like 4 or 5 episodes. But I want some character building off that as well. And then I want to introduce a couple more villains, maybe a little more Jared Leto in there as the Joker, because I really liked his take in Zack Snyder's Justice League. So that would be my thing for those characters. I want to stop with the Wonder Woman movies. I think we're good. Thank you. I'm done with that. I can't wait to see the other Aquaman movie, and then, you know, Flash, which I call Flashpoint. Hopefully it's like Flashpoint. I think that'll be super interesting, where, you know, you can make that kind of the jump start of all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, so in order, I would say the new Flash movie, and then you do Man of Steel 2, and then you do that, you know, Ben Affleck Batman series, then Justice League 2. And then I think at that point, you just kind of see where the characters go. But unfortunately, you know, now we're probably 5 years later at this point. So these cats are old. Ben Affleck is probably going to be done. So what I'm saying sounds good, but it's not going to happen just because they're taking too long. But you know, DC, that's what I would have done the second you saw Josh Whedon's Justice League. You'd have been like, fuck, Zack Snyder, what do we do? And it's kind of upsetting because you see the success of Zack Snyder. Even just, you know, he just won an Oscar for the most cheered moment, that Flash scene, which was a great scene. Again, going back to the comic book mindset, that's the scene you want to see. That's the Flash, bro, right there. And I geeked out hard on that. I was like, ooh. And a lot of people, like my wife, has no idea what's going on. And she's like, well, that scene was too long. Why is he going so slow? And I'm like, do you not understand what's happening? I'm like, how am I married to you, woman? He's literally resetting time. He's going back in time. He's spinning the earth so quickly and so fast that it's reversing time. And he's going back to save everybody. And I even slowed it down because, you know, at the end of that scene, when Cyborg comes together, you could see his face like merge back together. And I'm like, he got blown up. The whole earth ended. Like Darkseid won. And Flash just reversed it all. And that's dope.
So Tony's sitting on the couch with his wife. You got the whiteboard and you're slowing it down. Like, okay, here you go. Right here. This is why this is happening. That's why this is happening.
Oh, dude, I had to teach her some. Yeah. And regretfully, I had to pause it multiple times to explain, you know, because it's 6 parts, right? You know, 4 hours long. So I had to pause it, and she's like, wait a minute. So is this different than the other one we saw? And I'm like, just forget about that one. I'm going to walk you through this. So every part. And then when Martian Manhunter showed up, like at part 4 or something, I think, you know, it's 2 hours in the movie. It's halfway done. And I freaked out, you know, because I didn't see it before. And she's like, who's that? And I was like, oh, I wish someone else was here right now because I can't understand. But, you know, again, you look at that movie, bro.
Yeah.
That to me is like the epitome of a comic book movie because it's some great character building, but it's not too much. But, you know, you kind of see how like Wonder Woman and Flash, you kind of see them build to the characters they are in that short amount of time frame to where you have feeling and you have caring for them, but you don't need a lot more. I don't need like a 2-hour origin story of the Flash, you know, but you watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, it was just enough. You know, he had his powers, but he didn't really know. But like that type of stuff, I feel like we don't need to do anymore with Zack Snyder. We have a really good foundation and we could really build off that. And it's so disappointing that they're not going through with that. I heard rumors. Of course, we always hear rumors, but that's how I would do it. I don't want to get selfish and go deeper into the rabbit hole that I want, but those movies that I mentioned with Man of Steel 2 and the Batflat series, I think that would be a good start.
Well, there you go, DC, because you're definitely listening to this podcast. That's what Tony wants. Hopefully, Tony can get what he wants. There you go. That'd be great. No, I totally hear you as far as you're talking about that being just a good comic book movie. That's really the feel that I had with Matt Reeves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas maybe not comic book to a T, but to those that are in love with Batman film, you know, Batman movies, this was definitely a cooler spin, just in the sense that I felt like this was a better portrayal of just what Gotham City is. You know what I mean? Just dark and full of crime, and really it had an older feel to it if you're comparing it to the Dark Knight, whereas Dark Knight was very modern technology, and this was just kind of run down, dark, wet, dreary crime mobsters. You know what I mean? Yeah. It just had that full Batman feel to it.
For sure. And I think what Matt Reeves did a great job of is, amongst many things, but the big thing I appreciated from the start of the film, that opening scene, like we've talked about before, is he gave Gotham City like its own character. Yeah. You know, like Gotham City was like a character in the movie. Like in a post-credit scene world, it would say Gotham City, you know, like that. Yep. It really did, because from the get-go, you understand that from that, like, you know, upshot bird's eye view of what Times Square is, and you see how crazy it is on Halloween, which, by the way, I want to mention, the narration of Robert Pattinson was one of my favorite things on earth. So
agreed.
Good. So good. But when you got a bird's eye view of that city, when he's narrating, you really get a feel for like, whoa, this place is fucked up. Like, I feel for the good citizens of Gotham, that Gotham is being destroyed. Who will save the day? Like, that's who I felt as a viewer. And I think that's what Gotham needs to have. You know, we haven't seen that portrayed, not even the Snyderverse. And I just think it was just incredibly well done. And I don't know if you noticed this. I did, of course, because I've seen it 3 times, but it didn't stop raining.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how it is in the comics most of the time, is it's always dark and it's always raining, because rain creates gloominess and depression. And again, that's the character of Gotham City. And again, you got to appreciate that. You got to see those little nuances where not a lot of people would pick up on that. And Matt Reeves took it and he ran with it. The only thing, and I think I said this in your TikTok, but the only thing I don't say I didn't like, because I wouldn't change the film, but it was intentional. But the slow zoom ins, there was a lot of those. Yeah. And I appreciate it because I love good filmmaking. And I think he turned off a lot of people because of that. And if you take that out, it doesn't give a chance for the score and the music to kind of build up. So if you're not a filmmaker, you don't appreciate that type of stuff. But I think a lot of people, we have an attention span of 10 seconds. Yeah. So it probably turned people off. I enjoyed it personally, but I could see how critics might say it's too long and I got bored. I get it. And that's, I think, what I said to your boy, because I think he mentioned something like that. And I'm like, I kind of understand that. I personally didn't see it that way, but I could be objective and appreciate that. You know? Yeah. No, I'm totally with you 100%. This was very much so. And I think I even said in our original conversation was it wasn't, this was not a superhero movie. That's right. To me, at least, right? This was very much
like take it out of the category of anything other superhero that you've seen. This was like film, straight film. You know what I mean? There was a lot of attention to the cinematography that you don't see in a lot of superhero movies. So it's like if you're walking in hoping to get an identical superhero movie to the other ones that you've seen, well then you're going to be disappointed. Because this had very much Matt Reeves focused on the artistic side of things with camera movement.
Correct. And
which I appreciate.
Did a phenomenal job with it. You know, even just the fact of when the Riddler was first approached, or excuse me, when we first see him, just
that
the fact of like,
in the rain. Yeah.
Bro, come on. Not only does he do that, but then the lightning strikes and you get a little glimpse of like whatever he's wearing. You don't really know. You've seen the trailer, but then you see the senator, whoever it was, that's walking by, and you just hear, and you're like, oh shit, what is he going to do? Is he going to strangle him? Is he going to beat him? And then he does it. And it's this weird, like, you don't expect it because he's so new to murder. And he does this like loud scream that normal humans don't make. It's like what you would feel if you were him, you know, this anger and this, you know, that type of thing. And then when, I don't want to spoil it, but well, no, fuck it. You guys seen it by now. But when he drops the carpet cutter and the camera follows the carpet cutter.
Oh yeah.
And then it pans out and you see him kind of in the background. And of course he's blurred out with the aperture, but then you just kind of see his anger and him build up and then him calm down. And then him slowly walk over to the carpet cutter. That was 90 seconds. So a lot of filmmakers would cut that out, but just little things like that was throughout the entire film where you look at an object, you appreciate it, you see what's happening, and then in the foreground or in the background, you see something come out of focus into focus, and it's this very sexy, unique, artistic style of filmmaking that, you're right, we don't see in comic book movies, but name the last movie that was that gorgeous.
Yeah. No, I totally hear what you're saying. It's almost like, I mean, it's true, right? You say we have an attention span of 10 seconds, maybe even less, but it's...
Wait, what'd you say? I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, okay. Well, here's the whiteboard over here, all right?
Okay.
No, this was, it almost like, even though they were drawn out and longer, it kept your attention just because it was different. Like, because in the back of your mind, you're like, well, I'm at a Batman movie, but now I'm sucked in because this is different than any Batman movie I've ever seen. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Off of that alone. Yeah.
And you don't know what's coming of it. You know, that's what I loved about the apertures that he was doing, the you know, the focus and the unfocus, because he never spent too much time, like you never saw him pan out and focus on one specific object unless it was landscape. It was always just incredible apertures when it comes to like being in focus and out, because it kept your attention on literally what filmmaking does is the character or the subject. But then in the background, it kind of kept you a little bit curious, like you were engaged. What's going on there? Like, is that a character behind him that's a little bit fuzzy? Like, is he relevant to the scene? Like, so it's keeping you engaged versus you're seeing everything and there's no focus to one specific subject. So you don't really relate or get a good feeling for that character. And they just did a great job with it. And I think we just got to forget about comic book movies for a second and superhero movies and just say it was a beautifully shot film. And the story I thought was very unique. A lot of people hated on it for being too dark. But again, I go back to, if you're a comic book fan, this is how Batman is depicted.
It's dark. Yeah.
Like go read. You could watch the cartoon because it's really good. It's on HBO Max. But The Killing Joke. It's The Killing Joke is obviously with the Joker, and it is gruesome. There's like, you know, incest and rape and like crazy shit. And that is DC, bro. Like, there's no Marvel movie that is going to do something like that. But that is an animated movie that I could see DC doing in live action. The only reason they wouldn't is because they would get blowback on Twitter. Like, but DC was built on dark, disgusting, you know, dirty stuff, and that's what's great about it.
Incest and rape doesn't leave Marvel a lot of room for comic relief, so probably never happened.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But hey, but Marvel, something to think about.
Yeah, there you go. Gosh, there you go. But you are absolutely right though, where it's dark to begin with, and it's like we talked about in the beginning of this. Detective Comics is where he first started. And what was he in this movie? A detective. You know what I mean? And
legit detective too. Like I loved his.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love his whole attitude. And the fact that he was working with Gordon, I thought was genius. You know, because they have this cute like banter going back and forth. I'm trying to think of like a good example. I don't want to say Lethal Weapon, but like it's that type of dynamic where, you know, Batman only makes a joke with Gordon.
Yeah.
You know, and he's not even really making a joke. He'll just say something funny, like the whole thumb drive thing I thought was hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
Where he takes it out. And then it gives Gordon a chance to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But Batman always kind of throws up for the alley-oop, right? He always throws that. But that banter was so rad, though. I really enjoyed it. I hope, like, I'd like to see a spinoff like that. You know, like let me get an HBO Max series with Gordon and Batman shows up for like 2 minutes, you know, an episode or something like that would be cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this commissioner. I mean, Gordon was great, I thought. Yeah. I don't know. I liked all of it. You know, it's hard for me because the conversations that I have had, you obviously know. So it's nice to hear it from a more of a comic book perspective, which we did when we originally talked about it. We kind of threw that disclaimer where we're like, we're talking about movies. We're not really throwing in, you know, comic books, but it's good to have more of the comic book side of the conversation.
For sure. And, you know, I think a lot of people that appreciate comic books would like this film for sure. But more importantly, I think hopefully it opens up for people that did enjoy this film that aren't into comics. You know, maybe you have more of an objective view and you actually go read some comics. You know, don't have to go to a store. You could buy it online or you could watch it online. And, you know, it's all digital now. So if you want to get a digital, but if you just appreciate a little bit more about those specific stories. One thing I really enjoyed about going to the premiere early is they give you like a comic book. I don't know if you got one when you went, but I went to a DC fan premiere. So it was actually 4 days before the release. So I saw it on a Monday. And,
nice.
Yeah. And they give you like a comic book that's kind of like The Long Halloween, but it's a depiction of what Matt Reeves used to create the movie and the story.
Cool.
So it kind of takes like Long Halloween and year one and all these different things, and it kind of explains why the Batman is in this situation. Yeah. And, you know, the comic books that you actually read explain it. So hopefully people that watch this are like, hey, this is a great movie. It opens up a little bit more nerd culture to actually read more comic books, hopefully. Because, you know, if you watch like Civil War, great movie. Probably one of my favorite Marvel movies.
Oh, for sure.
Dude, you know why it's your favorite? It's because it's nonstop fucking action and every Avenger is in it. Yeah. And like every Avenger has 15 monologues and they're all great. And the fight scene with Iron Man and fucking Captain America was like one of the greatest in history.
Yeah.
It's just a great, but you can't compare that to the Batman. Like these cats have been superheroes for 10 years in their world. Yeah. So it's just so much room to grow, and I'm super stoked to where this is going to go.
I completely agree. It was such a welcomed spin on the character and just kind of like a back to roots feel. And it is exciting for me to watch DC hopefully build something. You know what I mean? Let it slow burn for a little bit. Like this whole movie was a slow burn. Yeah. So let's continue to do that. I mean, you nailed it with one.
Copy it.
Do it with more. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so I got to ask you. We've spent a while talking about Batman, so we know you're nerdy about Batman. But anybody who comes on the Soda Nerds, we like to say everybody's nerdy about something. Okay, you could be nerdy about plants if you want it to be. You know, it doesn't have to be comics, doesn't have to be collectible. So if you're taking Batman out of the equation, what is Tony Berardo nerdy about from day to day?
Ooh, that's a great question. So yeah, good question, dude. That's hard to think. There's so many things, but if I had to pick one thing, it would be health and wellness. If I can combine those two things.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, first thing, I was a comic book nerd when I was a kid, but then I became a little bit overweight and I had braces, and then I was like, I couldn't do a kickflip anymore or even an ollie. And when I was in middle school, I was like, dude, something needs to change. So I joined the wrestling team.
Oh, nice.
And I did some freestyle stuff, and I lost some weight. I lost like 75 pounds, and because I was pretty overweight. And then eventually I was like, oh, now I could do more tricks on a skateboard. This is dope. So I was like, let me get more into this. And then when I was 18, I got certified as a personal trainer. And ever since then, I've always had a passion for health and wellness. In fact, my podcast is about health and wellness if it's not about geek stuff. And I've even contemplated so much on having 2 separate podcasts because I talk a lot about health and wellness, but I also talk about geeky shit, but those are 2 different listeners more often than not.
Yeah.
And that also kind of makes me sad too, where a lot of us only have 1 or 2 passions, and that's what we stick with, and that's what we only do. And it's hard to get out of our comfort zone. So, that this is the podcast is my release to talk more about health and wellness, because most of my career, like my professional careers, I can't really, I was in the beverage industry for so long. So Monster Energy, to be specific, for almost a decade, that's not health and wellness. Like all those motherfuckers are all hopped up and they, drink sugary drinks. They don't care about their health. I don't work there anymore, so I could talk shit. But like, I could never take my passion and put it to my career. So that's what I nerd out about most all my free time, whether I'm recording or not, is health and wellness and preaching how to be healthier, whether it's nutrition or working out or just going for a walk or taking vitamins and supplements. That's my nerd passion.
Yeah, that's awesome. And he stated it for everybody listening, but if you listen to Tony's podcast, that's what you're going to get is a lot of that health and wellness. If that's something you're looking to be better at in your life, that's a good place to go for it. I've listened to a few, and you have quite a few people on that like to come and talk about health and wellness there with you, but some great information. And I will say, I know this doesn't have to do with Batman. This doesn't have to do with this, whatever. But I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you mentioned that you are a vegan, correct?
I am. Yeah.
And I'm just curious what brought you down that path. I know we're getting into more of like your kind of territory for your podcast, but I'd just love to hear about it, because I'm such a person that's like, I don't know. Number one, I don't know how I could cut meat out of my life to become a vegetarian, but even to go as far as vegan, I mean, have you always been that way, or is it something you kind of developed?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, originally it started, to kind of give the short version. So about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease.
Oh, okay.
Crohn's disease, millions of people have it a year, but every single person is different.
Yeah.
I have a very rare case. I'm sure your listeners won't. We'll skip through this, but skip like another minute if you don't want to hear this, guys. It'll be quick. But my case is like, no matter what I eat, it doesn't matter what it is. You don't know what it is, right? Because there's no X-ray in your stomach. But no matter what I eat, something happens to where my intestines just like close up, like someone's stepping on a hose. And obviously nothing can go out, right? TMI.
Yeah.
So what happens is I end up getting extremely bloated and I have to go to the hospital and they have to pump me out. And this was happening like every 2 months for 5 years straight, 4 years straight. Yeah. So obviously my hospital bills went through the roof. Good thing I got a good job. Yeah. But more importantly, I was like, what can I do? So the doctors kept telling me, take this medication, take that medication, do this shot of Humira, which you probably heard the infomercials on that shit like every 5 seconds. And the side effects are like, death and blood disease and tuberculosis and all this shit. So I'm like, all right, so I guess I'll take that. And I took it and symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm getting rashes and I'm getting these reactions. So then I started doing my own research. And turns out nutrition has a huge part of not just Crohn's, but chronic diseases as a whole. Things like cancer, heart disease, heart attacks, high blood pressure, like all types of stuff. It all comes down to nutrition. It's not even working out that's important. It's what you eat that is extremely important. And we're seeing this massive case of chronic illness in America in particular go up, but nowhere else in the country. And there's only one thing that's different between here and other parts of the world. And it's not the view. It's not the drinking water. It's the food we consume. It's how we get our food, and not just meat in general. But I started educating myself on the meat that they serve in Europe versus the meat that we get here. And if you get just a ground beef from Publix or Kroger, wherever you get your meat, about 75 people touch that meat before it even hits the store. Within that time frame, stuff could happen. We don't know what it is. We'll never know what it is, most likely. But something was going on within our meat, from killing the animal and how they're raised and how they're stored, to being on your plate where it's less nutrient dense than it was 100 years ago, which is why just Google, if you get a sec, Google 1950s beach photo. If you guys are listening out there, and if you want to do it too, John, you can. But 1950s. I'm doing
it right now while you talk.
Yeah. So 1950s, every single person in that photo is gorgeous.
Yep, they're all fit.
They're all fit. Yep. I hope you can throw this up on TikTok or something. But they are all immaculate. Like, they're so pretty. And of course, their suits are outdated. It's the 1950s, for God's sakes. So their suits are hideous. But everyone is fit. And the only difference between now and if you Google 2022 beach view, you're going to be disgusted with yourself.
Yeah.
The only thing that's changed is food. So that told me, wait a minute, if chronic disease is up, Crohn's disease is up, cancer is up, and our obesity is up, well, if it's food, maybe I should look at my food. So then I went through an elimination diet and I started cutting out red meat. I was still having issues. I was eating chicken and fish, but I was still having issues. Yeah. Then I cut out chicken, still have an issue. So I went through what they call an elimination diet, and I just eliminated everything one by one. I did a 45, 60-day trial on each item. And eventually I also cut out gluten, and I cut out artificial sweeteners and sugars and energy drinks and all that shit. Soda, I don't drink that anymore. And I have not had an issue in years. And I don't have medication. I'm not on medication. I got off that too. So I'm in what they call remission. So any issue I have, I can handle at home. And, that's what it is. So that's the long-winded answer, but ultimately that is what sprung me. I'm Italian, by the way, for reference, if you guys can't see. I hate being vegan. Let me just be clear about that. It is not enjoyable. I want everyone to know that. But I do it because of my health, and unfortunately it's either this or, I end up in the hospital. So I chose this lifestyle.
Yeah, I applaud you for it, because it's kind of, you had to choose what worked for you, right? I mean, that's kind of what we all have to do, is find what works for you and go with it, but pick something healthy. You know what I mean?
That's right.
For sure. And I know that's kind of a rabbit trail compared to a Batman conversation. However, the only reason I go there is because we really do. Everybody's nerdy about something, right? So yours is health and fitness. I just wanted people to be able to hear just a little bit of a backstory behind that. So thanks for sharing, for sure. But if we wanted to circle back, I mean, I know we've been talking for a while here.
Let's do it, dude. It's all good. If your listeners are still with us, I'm sure they are. If you guys are still here, I hate to play the comparison game, but I'm going to. Oh, I love it.
I'm going to play the comparison game. We don't necessarily have to go with Batman himself as across the board of actors, but I'd love to hear kind of just like Batman gadgets, Batmobile. Who do you think has the best? What has been your personal favorite out of, now you've had a few Batman to choose from?
That's a good question.
What do you like?
See, I think this is the same thing as like the LeBron James and Michael Jordan convo, because I'm 36.
Yeah.
So LeBron might be the better player, but I'd never admit it. Like, it's always going to be Jordan for me.
Yeah, it's Michael for sure.
Yeah. And it's hard for me not to love every Batmobile, but I'm just like, dude, I'm a Tim Burton.
There she is.
I'm even showing it if you guys are listening. Like, I have tons of collectors, and that to me, for two reasons. Number one, it's what I was grown up like watching, and I loved.
Yeah.
But I love I loved what it did, and it was, to me, true to like the animated series, the Batman.
Yeah.
Because it was more a vessel to take him places versus destruction. And it was more intimidation versus killing people with 2x4s and cement trucks, and like what the Snyderverse did, like a tank, where he's like, he'll take a fish line and throw it to like a Ford 150 and then sling that and like kill 5 people. It's like, it was entertaining. But I mean, yeah. So I say the closest thing to that is probably Matt Reeves' take, only because it, to me, is more similar than any version, right? But the sound of it, I really liked.
That's
the one thing that took me, because it reminded me, honestly, when I heard it, you know what I thought about? I didn't think this is the best Batmobile. I was like, that reminded me of Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because that sound is very, very common in the Burton universe versus like in Snyder and Nolan, where it's like it's very high tech.
Yeah.
As opposed to like it's fire raging it. So that to me got my nipples hard for sure. But only because it reminded me of Tim Burton. So if I had to put them neck and neck, I'm winded so much right now because it's hard for me to decide, dude. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Tim Burton, if I had to pick, final answer, Regis. Tim Burton.
There you go.
Batmobile.
I don't think you can go wrong. I don't wherever you're going, right? I mean, unless it's maybe George Clooney, but
or what was worse? Was it Val Kilmer or George? Do you remember that one, the circular one with the shark fins?
It's hard to if you're looking at just Batmobiles, right? But it's hard. It's hard to give anything credit when it's being compared to the George Clooney movie. In my opinion, it's hard to see anything good. You know what I mean? Even if you are just comparing one singular item, it's still
it's so true.
It's still tough because it came from that movie. So
God, it's hard to admit. Yeah.
But I loved this newer one. Yeah. You know, I thought it was just like you said when you said sound. I mean, that's the biggest for me was when it first fired up. It was like, whoa. Okay, that's pretty sweet.
That's the one, dude. Yeah, it's that intimidation factor. In fact, that was probably one of my favorite scenes. And there's only one Batmobile scene, and it is incredible. It truly is probably one of the best scenes in the movie. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I didn't like the fact, I got to tell you, I didn't like the fact that it was so quote unquote like, cement proof, and but like it blew through so many things. And it looked like it didn't have a scratch on it. Maybe it did. But then like the window when Colin Farrell was shooting it, it was bulletproof glass, but it was making indentations. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, so the glass makes indentations, but his tech on the outside of the body kit, like that could blow through cement trucks. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it was entertaining for sure, but I would have loved to see like more. I feel like year 2, he wouldn't have that much of a strong vehicle, in my opinion. But I also didn't see a lot of the tech, so maybe he did. But it just, from the looks of it, it didn't seem like it could handle it. But I think they did that only because when you come from a Snyderverse, where he's literally blowing through everything, like literally. I mean, from Batman vs Superman, he destroyed a big shipper, like a ship tank?
Yep.
I mean, come on, dude. He blew the whole thing. So you can't really go from that. Like, you can't watch that and then watch the Batman and him not blow through trucks. So I get it. But I think you're right, though. It's hard to compare the two, but he did a great job with it. It's definitely up there for sure because it's so realistic, right?
Yeah. It is for sure. I think it's the sound alone where it just had more of the actual, like a muscle car type feel to it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you were firing up a fucking spaceship. It was a car, you know, which was pretty sweet.
Yeah, dude. I love that for sure because I even saw that, I live in Tampa and they only picked 10 cities in the country to do a press tour. And thankfully they, for some reason, picked Tampa. I don't know why, but they picked it and I went there and actually saw the Batmobile in person. I got a great picture to send you. Cool. And they rev it up right in front of you. And it sounds like that, like legit. Not as powerful, obviously, because I'm sure they turn down the flames so they don't light people's face on fire. But it's very intimidating. And that to me is like, if a dude was year 2 Batman and he was building that, it would be clunky, it would be noisy, it would be like, it would look like that. And sure as fuck, dude, I think they did a great job with it. Now, here's the kicker, though. Do you want them to evolve that? And that, let's say there's a new movie. Because, that was the big thing that I enjoyed about Tim Burton is it was the same in Batman Returns. Yeah. Versus, like, Zack Snyder's take. I mean, he upgraded all the way to, you know, the Justice League at the very end. He has like this massive tank.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, come on, bro. Like, I know you're 20 years as a Batman, but I don't want to see that evolution in one movie. I want to see it like throughout multiple movies. Like, let's say there's
100%.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
100%. I think the way I feel about that is like, you know, not to go back to Marvel. I'm sorry. That's just where my head goes. But if you look at, if you're comparing like the Batmobile to the Iron Man suit, right? Look at where the Iron Man suit went from in the beginning to the very end, right? You didn't build it over one movie, but whereas you're talking about bullets making indentations on the Batmobile, same thing with Tony Stark. There was small things like Ant-Man being able to slide into the cracks of his suit, right? He learned from that and he built a better suit in the next movie, where this would be the best thing. Whereas in the next Robert Pattinson movie, maybe you don't see those indentations. It's small little things like that where it's like, he learned from that and he built something better. He didn't build a fucking tank over the span of one movie, but he made small improvements and learned from the past, you know?
Exactly. Like, that's why everyone's hating on, I keep bringing up the Skrull suit. Everyone hates on it, but I loved it. And I loved how he fell and had the parachute. So I feel like the next time we see him, I don't want the full cape. I want like a in between the Skrull suit and like the cape that we know from like Nolan's universe. I want something in between to where he learns from it. It's a little bit better than the Skrull suit, but it's also not absolutely outrageous where there's a cape that just flaps and that he can glide from it. Because again, that wouldn't happen in real life, I don't think. So I'd love to see evolution, and hopefully that's Matt Reeves' take. I would imagine it is very similar to how we did the Planet of the Apes films. Is he's very very strategic when it comes to the evolution of characters and scenery and props and stuff. So I thought he did a great job. I was a little upset when I saw the movie because we got that little teaser in the jail, and then the other day we got the deleted scene.
Yeah,
and then I became happy.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, and a lot of people, like I talked to a buddy who's a huge Batman geek as well, and he goes, you know, dude, they should have put it in the film. And I go, but if they would have, you know what you would have been talking about? That.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because it was really, I want to talk about it in a sec, but it was incredible. But what I loved about Batman that we didn't talk a lot about is Paul Dano was, to me, one of the best villains. I mean, he's up there in my eyes with Heath Ledger.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Just even in that, just like the realism, you know, fucking psychopath, like not
Zodiac.
not cartoonish. You know what I mean? It was very like, this is a troubled soul, and he portrayed that troubled soul very well.
And you know, again, I go back to, let's look at the comics. Year one of the Riddler, he wasn't Jim Carrey's Riddler. Okay. Yeah. But what would be interesting if I'm Matt Reeves is he's a Zodiac. He's in the jail. Batman fucked up his plan. He thought Batman was with him, but now there's some psychological warfare. You know, the Joker, and maybe there's other villains in there that are getting inside of Riddler's head. Maybe he gets a little cuckoo. Maybe he has a nervous breakdown. And maybe he like becomes the Riddler that we think he should be. Maybe he's like a goofy, campier character, but he turns more like a psycho Goofy and not funny Goofy. But maybe he evolves as well. You know, maybe instead of the mask, maybe he shows proudly the question marks and the puzzles that he loves so much. You know, maybe he evolves to that version as well. So I think that's what you got to look at with that character is he's never been a serial killer before. Like, this was his first time committing crimes. You know, and what I loved about it is he won. Oh yeah. Like, the villain won in that movie. Yeah. Fucking awesome. When's the last time that happened in a superhero movie?
It needs to happen more, because that's what happens in real life. The villain wins.
The villain always wins. Yes. Like, life is not easy. Life is very difficult and challenging, and it's not always like sunshine and rainbows, which is a great example of, you know, that whole where Batman worked his ass off to solve these things, and he fucked up, and the whole city got flooded. And I love that scene when they were at Arkham with Joker, and then you get to see the deleted scene, and I just thought, I cannot wait to see his version of the Joker. Barry, how do you pronounce his last name?
I'm not sure.
Eternals. Oh boy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Who's playing the Joker? Yeah, Barry. He's like an Irish dude.
There you go. Sorry, guys. Barry from the Eternals. We'll just put it that way.
We'll call him that way. But yeah, I loved how he was. You watched that deleted scene, obviously, I'm sure.
Oh, that dude looks fucking gnarly. Like, just
Sick, dude.
it's they're sticking with the dark feel. That's for sure.
That is the dark feel. And again, there's a lot of comic books that depict Joker like that, where he has kind of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type face. So again, when you see that, you're like, but how come he's not wearing his makeup? Well, first of all, he's in prison, so most likely he's not allowed to wear makeup. Yeah. But second of all, like, that's kind of how the Joker is. He usually has this condition where he's forced to smile. Nolan's take was great because of the scars, but this guy actually has a permanent smile on his face the whole time, and it's fucked up. And whether it's a chemical burn that they used or whatever the origin story is, I don't even care. I don't even need an origin story. Just give me like a Hannibal Lecter style series of that, which I heard that's kind of what Arkham series is going to be, but I hope Joker makes more of an appearance on that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's it is cool too, like you say, that there are some Jokers in the comics that look like that, because it's unfortunate that people will still be like, oh, well, Heath did it better, or Heath did this just because it was Heath's Joker. You know what I mean? Right. Whereas to those people, it's hard to not say, like, well, do you want every single Joker from now until the end of fucking time that is portrayed to be exactly like Heath Ledger?
Yeah. Fuck,
because I don't understand that. Like, why would you not want a different portrayal?
And I would even challenge
acted well.
Right, exactly. And I would even challenge to say it tarnishes Heath Ledger's name if you try to make it more like him.
Yeah.
Because it was so fantastic and, so prominent, and it was so strange how it happened where he dies and then he wins an Oscar. Deservingly so. But let it end there. Like, don't even come close to do it. Even if you find an actor that can, there should be different versions of it, just so we can, keep that legacy of his alive, because it was so fantastic. But yeah, I thought he did a great job, that guy Barry, and I'm looking forward to, because that 5 minutes was probably one of the best scenes, and I hope it's in like the streaming movie, because I think it comes out on HBO Max, the Batman, at the end of this month, right? So I hope they toss it in like the director wanted to, right? Because I think that would be interesting. And then you heard about the Arkham series, yeah?
No, I haven't.
Do we have time to talk about that for a second?
Go for it. Yep.
So the Arkham series apparently is already in the works, already filming.
Okay.
And then ultimately what they're trying to do, from what Matt Reeves says, is he's trying to create an Arkham series on HBO Max, similar to what he's doing with the Penguin, with Colin Farrell's Penguin. But that Arkham series is going to kind of be like Oz.
Oh, okay.
Like where it's only in the prison, and he's going to use that as like a way to create an origin story for the villains. And Paul Dano's going to be in it, reprising the roles of Riddler. And then, of course, this guy, Barry, is going to be the Joker. And then hopefully they'll introduce, maybe, I don't know, Mr. Freeze, Scarecrow. And then we see from the series, these characters, let's say it's 8 episodes, each one gives an origin story and follows a character. And then maybe in Batman 2, we don't need an origin story for villains, right? Because we have this already.
Yeah.
So that would be rad. So I think that's what they're trying to do. Same thing with the Penguin.
That would be cool.
Yeah. And they're doing the spinoff with Colin Farrell's Penguin, which they're starting to film already. I believe it's in production. And that's going to be kind of the same thing where it's after Matt Reeves' Batman. How Penguin's like on the top of the building looking over the city. So I guess his series starts there.
Yeah.
And he's going to be the crime lord of it.
So who is directing these, and are they in conversation with Matt Reeves? Because you want them to have, again, right? We talked about everything doesn't need to be the same, but
for this, I think it has to.
It'd be nice if these kind of matched up and had that same feel, like you're onto something here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
From what I heard, Matt Reeves is definitely producing. I don't know if he's directing all of them, because I don't know if he can, but I heard he is writing all of them though.
Okay.
I heard he's writing all of them, which will be huge, because he wrote this one with. I forget the other guy's name, but yeah, they wrote the Batman with, on their own. So I would only want the script to be from Matt Reeves for sure, because it has to be that same universe. You know, it's
Yeah.
again a great example is Josh Whedon and Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Like when you see that script and when you see the film and Zack Snyder has one vision, you take some guy that has no fucking idea what he's doing in the DC universe. He knows very much to do in the Marvel universe. But then you bring him over to finish this and you're like, this is stupid. This is not your universe. So I hope they don't do that with Matt Reeves because I love his take and I want to keep that going. And, you know, hold on. Yeah. By the way, sorry, I brought up Whedon again. Since you're such a huge Marvel fan, what do you think about this theory? And I haven't heard this theory before.
Okay.
But I've talked to my buddy Tyrone, who's a massive geek. He's been on my podcast numerous times. Tyrone Magnus, awesome YouTube channel. Yeah, he's very famous. He's an actor as well. But real good dude. And we talked about this once, and I haven't heard it anywhere else. I'm going to tell you what my theory is. Okay. As far as I know, this is my theory. So sorry if someone else said it before me, but I have the videos to prove. What do you think about in 2017, Zack Snyder unfortunately had a death in his family, and he had to step away. So Warner Brothers brought in Josh Whedon, who's known for Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. What if they brought him in the good intentions of preserving the legacy of Zack Snyder and making a great Justice League movie? What if Josh Whedon was like, all right, guys. So he tells Marvel Studios, he's like, so guys, fucking DC just offered me this role of directing Justice League. I say I go in there and make this the stupidest movie ever so we can continue to reign as comic book champions in the live action universe.
Oh, boy.
I know it's a fetch, but dude, how do you sit in the editing room as Josh Whedon and let that mustache carry on? How do you think that's a good film?
You know, that's an interesting theory, and here we go. Like, we're starting... Well, I mean, we're divided on the screen right here. It's the war between DC and Marvel. Like, you know, you guys, DC on the block just can't handle that Marvel's rising above, and they got to come up with. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just telling you, it's a little funky. It smells a little funky.
It smells a little interesting. Yeah, that's
you know, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I mean, the Super Bowl's coming up. The Super Bowl is January 1st, and. Yeah. You know, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm going to lie here and say that, 2022, the Dolphins are on the Super Bowl. But they're also playing, let's say, I don't know. Let's say they're playing the Bucs in a perfect world. That wouldn't happen but let's just say. So the Bucs and the Dolphins. Now the Dolphins head coach steps out. But your best bet is to bring in the Bucs defensive coordinator to be the head coach of the Dolphins. What do you think they're going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, bro.
I mean, when you put it that way. Yeah, when you put it that way. Looks like Tom Brady's getting another ring, if you put it that way.
He better.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, dude.
That's a whole different world. Football.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly stopped watching. I had to make a sacrifice. I was like, do I continue to watch movies and geek out and spend my days doing that? Or do I spend it on fantasy football? And I stopped watching football aggressively.
I can't. I got to do it all. Football will always. I just have to.
Yeah. Who's your team?
I'm one of those guys that I say I
just watch everything.
No. I'm one of those guys that says I'm an owner because I own a piece of the only NFL franchise that's owned by the fans. The wonderful Green Bay Packers.
The Packers. Yep.
Yeah. And you have the same reaction that everybody else that's not a Pack fan has. They're like, oh, you're an owner. Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
that's it.
Yeah, there it is.
But bro, and they got the biggest fan base. They sell out the most tickets. I mean, what you gotta have it in your bloodline, right? To even go to a fucking game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're doing something right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can't hit on him.
Yeah.
I got a buddy who's from up there, and he's a Pacs fan. He'll try to go to every single game. He lives in Florida, but when the season comes, his dad lives up there, and he's not missing a game for sure.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, when you're into it for sure. But that is that is an interesting theory that Marvel is bleeding their way into DC and trying to sabotage it from the inside.
From the inside.
I'm sure you're not the only DC fan that feels that way.
Probably not. Yeah, we're very stubborn, and we have a a bad taste in our mouths for a lot of stuff. But, you know, again, I am a huge Marvel fan. You know, I love everything that they're doing, and I don't think there's a wrong thing that they've done.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just hope they continue on this path of where, like, No Way Home was, which I thought was great and opens up a lot of doors. But then you hear things, even though this is Sony, but then you hear things about Morbius, and it's like, dude, what are we doing here? So then you almost
fucking trash.
Yeah. Because, you know, now you hear all the shit that's going on about the universe, and they're not sure where Spider-Man falls and everything that's going on with Sony and Marvel. You know, it took forever to get Tom Holland into the MCU. Yeah. And not even his version, but what, you know, they wanted to do. They didn't know it was going to be Tom Holland, but they wanted to bring, you know, Spider-Man in. Sony was giving him so much shit. So it's like, if they let that negotiation or where they're trying to do behind the scenes fuck up, they're going to mess up something that they built so beautifully. And I thought, personally, I think that they've opened up the door to have, like, Ramsey come back and do another Spider-Man, you know, Andrew Garfield do another one, maybe even a spinoff where I've heard theories of, like, you know, Spider-Gwen and, you know, have her come back and, like, come on, Emma Stone would reprise the role. Like, there's so many possibilities of that universe. They're doing great things, dude. I just hope they keep the train going because I do enjoy those movies.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's a downfall at the same time. And I know we've talked about it. And when this chat between you and I comes out, we'll have already had a Morbius chat come up because we went and saw the Morbius movie and we talked about it. But the movie was just, it was so bad. But what makes me sad is that I feel like Marvel is now at this point where they can get away with making bad products because we're just looking at it from a universal viewpoint. Like, it doesn't, a standalone movie to us doesn't matter if it's shit anymore because it's a means to an end. You know what I mean? And I hate being in that mindset where it's like, let's judge a movie for the individual movie, not for where it's going, not for what it could be, not for, like, let's actually dissect the movie in itself and was it good or bad? Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, I can't wait to hear that, Chet, because I have not seen the movie and I refuse to. I'll wait for it to come out on Disney Plus or wherever they're going to stream it.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah. I wouldn't spend some money. Okay, so I don't even know how long we've been talking, but
just an hour and 25 minutes.
Oh, geez. Okay, so it's been a fun chat talking with you. But before we have you go, I want you to just kind of plug yourself. I know you got all your own stuff. I don't know if you have a website or not, but I know you got TikToks, podcasts. Throw it out there. Let the Soda Nerds listeners know where they need to go check out Tony Berardo.
My dude, thank you. Yeah, you can find all my content on social media. It's at the Berardo, so Berardo, the Berardo. I also have a website where you can see everything, theberardo.com, and you can see my podcast. You know, I do content creation on the side. And again, a lot of my stuff is health and wellness, but I have a YouTube channel where occasionally we'll nerd out and I'll talk about different things. But yeah, dude, that's my stuff. Check it out and give me a like. You know, give me a review as well if you listen to the podcast. I'm always learning to get better. I'm only at like 147 episodes or something like that. So we're getting there. It's a passion project of mine. So yeah, any support you can lend, appreciate you.
Good deal. And we'll toss all of that stuff in the description here, whether you're listening on podcasts or watching on YouTube. But yeah, Tony, thanks for coming on. It was a fun chat, man.
Yeah, dude. Indeed. We could probably talk for like 4 hours, but maybe we'll do this more often.
No, well, what we got to do is we got to get the other guy back on. We got to hear a battle between the two perspectives.
That would be fantastic. And the title of that will be Restore the Snyderverse. That would be the name of it.
Restore the Snyderverse from Tony Berardo, please. Right. DC. please do it.
Hey, Johnny, can you send this podcast to Warner Brothers for me?
Yeah, no doubt. We'll get right on that.
Thanks, dude.
No promises. I don't know that we're at the top of their list for requests, but yeah, there you go, everybody that's watching or listening. Thanks for being here. We enjoy having you here. If you are on podcast, just leave a quick review. Anything we can get, we love. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to leave a comment specifically with topics that you'd like to hear us talk about. We always love to cater conversations specifically to what you want to hear. But with that, Tony, we like to say that it's fun to be a kid, even if you aren't one. And thanks for joining. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you on the next episode. Deuces.
Peace.